For some reason, I just wanted to say good morning. Isn't that interesting? I guess you could say, in a way, it's always morning. It's always a new start. Every moment is a new start. I have a tendency to speak quietly, so I'm trying to speak loudly and project, and please feel free to give me one of these if you can't hear me. So this past weekend, Friday and Saturday, we had a gathering of senior students here that Mushin leads a study group. She's been doing this for years, and if you stick around long enough and go through all the steps and take Jukai and have a Sanzen relationship with one of the teachers, then eventually you'll also be invited to this group. And you can choose if you want to go. Not everyone goes, and not everyone goes every time. But you commit to a whole year of study where you read different texts and meet for 2 days at a time, I think 3 or 4 times a year. It's called Dao Ren. Thank you for the thumbs up. Dao Ren means people of the way, which we all are. People of the way of life, people of the way of truth, of Dharma. Dharma means truth. And I wanted to say something about Dao Ren, but it slipped my mind. Let's see. Oh yeah, so one of the things that one of the books that we've read this year is called Notes on Complexity. I highly recommend it, especially, I recommend it. I just recommend it, but it's very scientific. It's, some people probably already know it. This guy, Neil Thies, is that how you say his name? Thies? Theise. He's a Zen practitioner. He's a very devoted, long-time Zen practitioner, but he's also a scientist. And he talks in this book about what scientists are finding out about the nature of the universe through the lens of science. And it's very, you might say amazingly, but also obviously exactly what we find out when we look deeply into our direct experience and what mystics throughout time and space and various religious traditions and non-traditions have been discovering about the unity of what we call life, about the complete oneness of it, and also the distinctness of it, right? So each one of us is our own unique person, but at the same time, we are this one body, and the whole earth you can feel as one body. I'm going to read just a little excerpt from it and say a few things. So he's saying that the universe is a unity, and this is one lens in which science can see, can investigate on the molecular level and through quantum physics in ways I have really no idea about how exactly they do these experiments, but here's what he reports they find. He says, you might argue with me, instead saying that the universe contains distinct and separate living and non-living systems, and you would also be correct. However, that description is complementary with the view that the universe is, in its totality, a single living system. So they have this thing called complementarity, they call it, when at the same time, for instance, something can be observed, like light, for instance, to be a particle and also a wave. And they are completely opposite in a sense. How could that even be? That you could be a individual being and at the same time not individual being, a complete, a total part of this unity, complete unity with no division. So these are 2 points that we can touch when we look closely. Of course, most of us live in this idea of separation, in the sense of being a separate being, this being a separate object, this being a separate object, I am picking it up. But in our deep practice, in our Mushin hates the word deep. And by the way, I apologize. I'm not Mushin tonight. It was her turn to give the talk, and she called me this morning and said, "I'm tired. Can you give the talk? I'm old." And as the senior teacher, she has that right to call on me in that way. So she's resting as she should be, and being an example for us. In that way, to let ourselves rest when we need to, even if people are expecting us to do otherwise. I lost my spot again, so Mushin was there. Deep. She doesn't like this word deep because she feels, I love this word deep and I use it a lot. And she always, "Oh, what do you mean by deep?" It's just this vague word, and that people think, "I'm not deep, I don't see deep," and it brings up this sort of like division between shallow and deep. So what I might say is, like, when we look closely, when we feel closely, when we feel intimately, we can actually directly intuit or directly perceive this unity. We can feel that we are one, that we can't actually find the boundary between me and you. We can't actually find the boundary, if you feel, between where the body ends and the mat begins. It's a really beautiful meditation, is to just focus on that spot, on that place where you think the boundary of the body is. Even in space, you can feel like your hand, for example. And it's actually impossible to find a clear boundary there in our direct perception. And this is what scientists can also observe with the microscope or with whatever other kinds of tools of subtle perception that they've developed. The difference, in a way, though, and the really cool thing about discovering it for ourselves, is that in that place of non-separation, of recognizing our non-separation, we find peace. There's a kind of disillusion, there's a kind of relaxing on the cellular level, you might say, when we're no longer trying to hold this separation. That's that belief in separation, which is very useful in doing normal activities and relating to people. But it is the place where fear arises. And so if we can see for ourselves, and all the variations of fear, like irritation and anxiety and jealousy and, subtle stress. So if we can see, feel, recognize for ourselves this unity, then we find peace. But when scientists discover it through looking at science, it's very interesting and very mind expanding, and it can lead also to, I believe, this kind of release, but it often stays at a kind of intellectual level. And so it doesn't actually dissolve or relax that fear. And so one of the striking things about this book was one of the guys who was like, he was considered like maybe even more intelligent than Einstein. So he was like a peer with Einstein. I forget what his name is. Does anybody? Goethe. Maybe you've heard of Goethe. He was at the brink of discovering that this unity and also this complementarity, and how it could, you can't actually take any of these specific views, and they're all sort of dependent on the subjective, and they're true all at the same time, and these really mind-blowing, amazing windows into reality and sort of bursting the view of that we have of the material and separation. And yet he died of complications due to malnutrition, because he was so paranoid that people were poisoning him. So that's what I know. So through direct observation, we come to these same truths, and I think that that is very essential. I feel that that is very essential for actually what the point of Buddhist practice is, which is relieving our suffering. So let's see if I can read a little more of this. You would be correct to say that the universe contains distinct and separate living and non-living systems. However, this description is complementary with the view that the universe is, in its totality, a single living system. This is much the same as the way we deem each of our bodies in its entirety to be a living organism, even though we have non-living parts like hair and cartilage. At the boundless non-local scale of the quantum realm, that's a sentence, huh? At the boundless non-local scale of the quantum realm. So this is also something that we can touch right here and right now, this non-locality. This is the essence of Zazen. Zazen is the essential practice of Zen, of seated meditation. And it is to sit in non-local boundlessness. Yeah, I see some head shakes, right? We can touch that, we can taste it. Here, it is what we are. And our practice is recognizing it again and again, and also seeing what blocks it, and working on those things that block it, that block us from resting in what you might call, what Buddhism calls our true nature, this openness. Soten recently said, happiness is an open mind. Happiness is an open mind. At the boundless non-local scale of the quantum realm, the living nature of the whole transcends the particularities of each part. There are no purely alive domains and none that are exclusively non-alive. There is simply the living universe. There is simply the living universe. Causal generalizations about how we are all one with the universe are so common these days as to be trite. However easy it might be to thoughtlessly report that banal truism, though it is in fact exceedingly difficult to intuit it directly as a physical experience and not merely a belief. Right? So we can all sort of understand that it's all one, right? And we can believe that. It's obvious, right? Like the wood comes from the tree, and the tree dies and becomes the earth grows and becomes plants, and the mom eats it and grows an embryo, and the embryo comes out of the body and becomes another being, and the being dies, and so it's also easy. Well, maybe he's saying it's exceedingly difficult to actually touch it with our direct sense, to actually touch this sense that we are unified with the entirety of life. And even more so, we say, we are unified, right? This is like we and the rest of the world. But we always use dualistic language, right? But it's more like we are the world. We are the world. We're not just a part of the world. And this recognition, this intuitive, felt, bodily recognition of belonging, of being the world, it is innately relieving. Because I no longer need to change the world. I no longer need to get something from the world. I no longer need to manipulate the world in order to fill my sense that I'm lacking something or that I need to protect something. We can simply rest as the world, which is in constant flux, in constant change. It can't land anywhere. It doesn't ever land in any configuration, right? Take this room, for example. Like how it's just constantly shifting. Constantly, right? You can imagine, you can think back, okay, before we got here, it was just sitting here, this open room. And then one person walked in, maybe it was Zenetsu. Zenetsu did a bunch of stuff like moving the mats, opening the windows, the chant books under all the mats, which we now have, so you don't have to get them at the door. And then maybe Michael came in and they did some stuff over there and talked about how service was going to go. And then, I don't know, the next person, the people. And then we're all here, and then we're all sitting, and then we were all walking, and then people were leaving and coming, and now we're here. And now we have all these little movements, right? And so this one universe that we are, its nature is movement. In Buddhism, we say impermanence. This is one of the three marks of existence, of reality, is that it's impermanent. When we really believe and feel that we're separate, right? This belief of being separate is useful. It's not like we're going to completely get rid of it. It's very useful. But when we really completely believe that's what we are, and we've lost touch with our innate belonging, our innate unity, then we feel that we need to nail it down. Okay, we gotta get it in the right place, and we gotta keep it there. And oh no, it starts to move. Oh no, okay, I gotta, and then we get all this stress around needing to make my life the way I need it to be. And that manifests in so many ways. So in Zen, we come to rest. And then we allow the movement to flow through us. And each of us has our own unique movement, unlike anyone else. He says it's increasingly difficult to experience this unity, to intuit it directly, because our usual habitual experiences of the material world and our Western culture, they bias towards materialism. And later in this book, he explains sort of how that happened with this group of scientists in Vienna, or at least part of how that happened. Of course, it's the whole universe that made that happen, but one of the causal relations was this group of scientists who really favored this material worldview, and then a certain political situation which ended up dispersing them all over the world in different universities. And then that view became the main view of science, which then trickled into Western culture. Mm-hmm. So it's very interesting how we've grown up with this bias towards the separation and towards materialism. Although it's been in the human stream since the Buddha, right? The Buddha talks about this, so it's not like it's just Western culture. But there is a very strong stream of it in our culture. And so it's important that we counter it, and that we really look closely at this oneness that we are, and that we get to know it, and that we learn to rest as it. So our usual habitual experiences of the material world and our Western culture bias towards materialism, that the world is only its physical substance, and these continuously push us in the other direction, away from this direct intuition of our unity. But complexity theory, woven together with relativity and quantum mechanics, tells us a different story. Oneness is real and true. And while separation is also true, it is not any more true than oneness. They are a complementarity. Each, though different, is equally indispensable for a full comprehension of reality. And in Zen, we emphasize intuitive comprehension. So to comprehend this truth of oneness and also of separation, we call the relative and the absolute in our actual moment-to-moment life. There was this great quote, I think I may have wrote it here. Yeah, here it is. This is from, what's his name? Norman Fisher, famous Zen teacher. I think he died. Yeah. A modern guy. So he says, he's commenting on this koan, which I wanted to bring in as well. Maybe I will, we'll see. But first I'm just going to say his comment. He says, in walking, in sitting, just hold to the moment before thought arises. So this is a way of entering this unified field. Just hold to the moment before thought arises. Look into it, and you'll see not seeing. So we talked yesterday in the Dao Ren about koans. So the first day we focused on this book, and the second day was koan. So this is a koan. What does it mean to see not seeing? You don't have to think about it. It's just, it's poetry. In walking, in sitting, you could extend that in talking, in working. Just hold to the moment before thought arises. Look into it, and you'll see not seeing. And then put it to one side. When you direct your effort like this, rest does not interfere with meditation study. Meditation study does not interfere with rest. Oneness is real and true, and while separation is also true, it is not any more true than oneness. They are a complementarity. Each, though different, is equally indispensable for a full comprehension of reality. So how can we, this is an instruction for our actual living, how can we be engaged in all the activities of working and talking and taking care of our homes and our families and everything that we do, while at the same time being at rest in this oneness, not forgetting that we are this entire universe exactly as it is. While we're walking down the stairs, while we're talking, while we're turning on a car. There's a famous calligrapher in the Zen world named Kaz Tanahashi. And if you ever go to the Great Vow Monastery, there's a huge enso that he did, you can see there. And he's a very, very busy guy. He has translated, I don't know, dozens of books. He's always traveling around. I just now heard that he's in his 90s now, I think, and he's on a trip in China touring, doing some pilgrimage, or maybe Japan. And he's always traveling, he's writing, he's teaching, he's doing calligraphy. And someone once asked him, like, when do you ever rest? And he said, I'm always resting. He's resting. And that's true for all of us. We are always resting. There is part of us that is always resting. And through our practice, we can really discover it and learn to realize it, recognize it, give it the honor that it deserves. And if we don't do that, then we start to not like our lives. Yeah. So that's a clue. If you are not liking your life in any given moment, you have forgotten this part, this unified, resting part. Oneness is real and true, and while separation is also true, it is not any more true than oneness. They are a complementarity. Each, though different, is equally indispensable for a full comprehension of reality. This conviction comes not only from a subset of philosophies, or from ancient religions, or from New Age mystics, but from our modern, contemporary, empirical sciences. So there's a little taste of notes on complexity. I always bring so many things to share, and I end up usually not even sharing any of them, or just a very small. Here's a poem that Mushin wrote, so here we can bring her in here. She sent it in the encouraging words. If you're not signed up for our newsletter, it just gives you a once a week email where you can see all the things that are going on during the week and what's coming up this month. And also you get to hear some encouraging words from either myself, Mushin, or Soten. And so this is what she shared. And if you want to sign up for it, there's a sign-up sheet out in the lobby. You can just put your email and name, and there's also on the front page of our website, you can sign up. So this is the encouraging words that will come out tonight. It's titled, What is This? What is this? It's a koan. A koan is a phrase or a question or a story that leads us into a deeper looking or a clearer looking. What is this? With an open Dharma eye, and eye in the face, an eye in a heart, in the arms and legs that propel this body, in activity throughout this instant. You don't think of an instant as long, right? Throughout this instant. In all stillness, the innermost points, extending everywhere, a thread, continuous revelation. I love the word revelation. And you can think of life as it's a continual revelation. It's continually being revealed to us. We never know what will come next when we walk out that door. There's a beautiful mindfulness task. Chosen Roshi, one of my teachers, she wrote a book called Taming the Wild Elephant of the Mind. And it's just a series of mindfulness tasks that you can take up to help bring more attention to everyday activities. And one of them is to pay attention when you enter and exit doorways. So we open the door and we don't really know. We think we know what's on the other side, but we don't really know. And that's like every moment is like a new doorway. That's this continual revelation. And we can also live life with that kind of attitude, the heart attitude of revelation. What? So this reminded me of a koan, and yeah, I'll close with this koan. So in the Zen tradition, the Zen tradition is a tradition rich with what we call koans. The word koan in Japanese literally means public case. And it is a collection of dialogues, usually between masters and students or between students. And sometimes they're just one line, and sometimes they're like 2 or 3 pages long, a whole scenario, a whole scene that happened. And we can use them as practice igniters. So they have words, they have phrases, they have situations that don't quite make sense from the view of materialism or from separation. So you have to enter into the view of unity in order to penetrate what they're saying. And so then they help you to discover these aspects of the awakened heart mind. And there's something like 700 or maybe even 1,000, including all of the koans that have been passed down. And if you're interested in them, we have, I think, some of the koan collections, and if not, I'll get them soon for our library, and you can check books out from the library if you didn't know that. It's a wonderful Dharma library, and there's a little checkout, and you put your name and email there.
There's a section in the library called koans.
Oh,
and then
this is our librarian.
And then on the other side where there's sort of sources, there are some of the actual
collections.
So,
great.
Yeah, they are.
So under koan and under collections?
Well,
something like
sure.
that. Reference.
Reference section.
Okay, great. Okay, so here's the koan. Yunyan asked Dao Wu, these are a couple of our Chinese ancestors. Yunyan asked Dao Wu, how does Kuan Yin use all those hands and eyes? So if you've ever seen some of the depictions of Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, they have 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes, an eye in every hand, so they can see all the suffering in the world and they can respond and help with the hands. How does Kuan Yin use all those hands and eyes? Dao Wu answered, it's like feeling behind you for a pillow in the middle of the night. You know that when you're just barely awake or not? It's so second nature. It's so, just that phrase, how could I live my life like that? Without that extra effort, with this intuitive flowing. It's like feeling behind you for a pillow in the middle of the night. He said, I understand. What do you understand? The whole body is hands and eyes. Mushin says, with an open Dharma eye, an eye in the face, in a heart, in the arms, and the legs that propel this body. What do you understand? The whole body is hands and eyes. That's very well expressed, but it doesn't say it all. Oh, what would you say, older brother? So these two are brothers, which is very sweet. Can you imagine they're having this Dharma? You can imagine, so Zenetsu's there, Emmyo's there, and Zenetsu says to Emmyo, so how does Kuan Yin use all those hands and eyes, Emmyo? She says, it's like feeling behind your for a pillow in the middle of the night. I understand, says Zenetsu. Oh, what do you understand? Says the whole body is hands and eyes. Oh, Emmyo, that's very well expressed, but it doesn't say it all, Zenetsu. What would you say, older sister? All through the body are hands and eyes. So this is the intimacy, the deep intimacy that we can touch when we allow ourselves to. In Zen, there's a phrase from another koan. Not knowing is most intimate. Thank you.
More Bodhisattva vows can be found on page 5 of the chant book.